What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I'm welcoming back to the show Rodney Barnes. Welcome back, my friend.
What's happening? How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk to you about comics and everything. Last time I had you on, we dove deep into the world of Philadelphia, and you have not slowed down since then.
I try not to. Try not to.
So, one of the big things that I wanted to reach out and talk to you, you've been working a lot, doing a lot of projects with Star Wars as of late. But you just dropped a book recently, Batman Full Moon, and
Yes.
oh my goodness, it's so good.
You.
So
Thank you
let's
very
let's dig into that a little bit. Where did this idea for Batman Full Moon come about?
well. My editor at DC, um, we were talking about doing a Batman horror book, and we were kicking around a bunch of ideas. At first, it started off as a vampire book, Batman against a very prominent vampire, and but DC was already doing DC versus vampires. So it's like, well, how about werewolves? Because I typically think in the universal monster trinity:
Yeah,
Frankenstein, werewolves, Dracula. And so, yeah, that would be cool. We haven't really seen a Batman werewolf sort of fight team up in quite some time. I thought about Neil Adams as one, which was one of my favorites, where I think it's 255, but I'm not sure. And I was like, all right, homage. I love Neil Adams. I love werewolves. Let me see what I can come up with. And here we are.
yeah. What I love too about this story is how you guys have crafted the story in and of itself, utilizing the medium of comic books to it's being used with lights and shadows and darkness and stuff. Like it has a horror vibe, as
Yeah.
much of a horror vibe as you can get with a comic book. How much of that was your decision or the creative team's process with that?
I think, Stevan Supik, who is an incredible artist, I think he's doing incredible work
Yeah.
with lighting and tone and all of that stuff. I do think that um, I do think we had it in mind to create a dark story, a
Yeah.
darker story. I'm known primarily for Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is a dark story in a dark world. And bringing that to Batman, still you're working within the rules of the Batman world, Gotham City, and all of that. So, and Gotham City is depicted, if you think about Arkham and all of that, in a relatively dark sense as well. So you got to find the middle ground between the darkness of what Batman already is and the darkness of horror and what it would be to add in a supernatural element, like a werewolf. So it is a byproduct, I think, of the reality of what the story is and Stevan's incredible work.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things like in the first issue here, you're getting to see it's kind of it seems like this is a character that Batman seems like he hasn't really faced, or to this
Right.
level for a while. Because you even have, kind of there's a scene where he's going to the park to kind of have this face to face, and he's going in all out, like
Yeah.
super confident Batman, like I face Killer Croc. This is nothing.
Right.
And then you just pull like a scene out of The Revenant where like Leonardo DiCaprio just gets torn to shreds by a bear.
Yeah. Yes. And that was purposeful because I saw one person commented in a review and they were like, well, why would Batman be so confident? I'm like, well, he's Batman. It's like if you've got a winning streak that's gone on for damn near 100 years, you're not going to go in questioning yourself against anything. Whatever it is, I'm going to rise to whatever level I need to rise to in order to defeat it. And I got all my toys with me, and we're in Gotham City, so I'm playing at home. It's like whatever this thing is, the odds are against it. And he's going to find that it's a little easier said than done.
You can tell just from this first issue, you have a deep love and affection for Batman as a character, just with the respect you're taking to bringing in some of the characters of like, Man Bat and, calling the park Kane Park. And like, there's like, so where did I assume there's a love for Batman. Where did this kind
A
of
big time.
originate?
Well, you said it. It's a love for Batman and all the various. Like I said, it started for me back during the Neil Adams era when I was a little kid. Um, and then from the Frank Miller stuff and all the modern day guys that are in there making them now, it's like Batman's had such a rich history. And each one seems to build on itself. He continues to evolve as a character. Jim Lee's stuff, Hush, and so many stories that you want to sort of pay homage. I did a Jason Sean Alexander and I did a short story, a short Batman story in Brave and the Bold. But to be able to have my own limited series as a writer, you gotta pay homage. If you're coming from my place, I don't know if this is ever going to happen again. So I want to be able to put myself in a position where I say thank you not only to the character of Batman, but to all of the people who have had some hand in making the Batman that I know and love.
Yeah. Now, is it 5 issues? Is that what it's being solicited
Four,
as? Four. Okay.
four.
So,
Although we did go to a second printing, so it
oh,
would be great if it was five. So yeah,
hey, there we go.
yeah.
So you have this love for Batman. You like you said, you're pouring out everything you got into it because you never know with comics, right? Like, are you going to get
Never.
to this world again or
Mm-hmm.
something? Um, how is it for you of like figuring out what kind of characters that you want? Obviously, you're featuring Batman in this, but like piecing together the rest of the characters in the book, like where was it for you? Like, I gotta have these characters because I love that or whatever.
It's all selfishness. Characters that I want to play with. We wanted a love interest.
Mm,
Because Batman is really heavy testosterone. There's a world where you really don't see a whole lot of women in there unless they happen to be the antagonist. Um, and to be able, love Zatanna, love John Constantine, love Man Bat, again, going back to Neil Adams and those classic covers and stories. Um, just being able to play in that space. I always loved, I know Alfred is dead in the continuity
right.
of Batman, but because this kind of operates, the Black Label books and the Elseworld books sort of operate their own, off to the side. So I always loved that math of Batman and Alfred,
Yeah.
more than anything else. And with each one of those characters, from Constantine, particularly in the Swamp Thing books, to be able to bring him in, have him play the comic relief, have him have some supernatural bridge, because that's the thing too. You got a supernatural character in a werewolf, and you need to be able to take the tangible world and the supernatural world and build a bridge between the two so that it feels like this could really happen.
Yeah.
Characters like Constantine and Zatanna that play within the magic spiritual realm, they help you do that.
Yeah. And you have such a dark story that it allows you to have that levity, a little bit of the date was it and constantly, like you said, he bringing in the humor, and so I think it gives it a nice balance that like we're getting jam packed, like you said, it's at Black Label, and because I don't think you could do this book at any other label
No,
of DC's.
no, no.
I turned one of the page, I'm like, oh, that's just like a head.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so
yeah.
good.
And you get 32 pages to play with, which gives you room for a little bit more story. And even with Swamp Thing, when he would have those major team ups, you would have two or three books that were relatively sparse, and
Mm,
then a team up would happen in the annual or something. It wouldn't be every single book. This is like the Avengers or Justice League Dark, but I always wanted to feel like a Batman book primarily.
yeah. One of the things that when I was reading the first issue, I noticed your podcast has ruined me because I can only read the captions now in your voice. Like when that opening panel, I'm just like I'm picturing you reading it to me as a book. Like I'm just like I think that's a story right there. Like I'll pay Rodney Barnes to read my comics for me.
There's an idea. I'm always looking for a new revenue stream. It would be great. I read my books. Yeah.
That's right.
Bedtime stories with Batman and Rodney.
Right. It's so good. It sells itself.
Thank you.
Um, I mentioned your podcast.
Yes.
You have the podcast Run Fool. If you all are horror fans and you have not checked out this podcast, um, I feel like you have comic book ideas forever with that podcast because I'm just like I listen one after the other and it creeps me as all get out. But man, you have a gift, and I think you see it in your podcast the way you tell stories, but then as well as through the medium of TV shows, the medium of comic books. So where is it for you that you find your voice of the to tell stories the way you do?
Um, it's funny. First, thank you for the compliment. Being able to have some place to put my anxiety, because it's funny. I had a lunch with one of my agents, and at a certain point, he had to say, "I get it. You have a lot of ideas." It was so many things that I wanted to do, so many ideas to pitch. Um, and they're thought through because sometimes I can't sleep and I'll just sit up and ruminate on a story. But specifically with Runful, it's I always loved the anthology series
Mhm.
sort of structure. From Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, The Hitchhiker, whatever it was, I've loved those. And they haven't been very successful in the last decade or so. It's almost like they sort of fizzled out. And I was looking for a way to what's the modern day version of telling those stories? What's that look like? What does it feel like? And I felt like I came up with an idea, the serialized idea of me and my grandmother and her telling me stories as a kid, and integrating that emotion into it and that relationship into it to give the anthology series a personal feel so it doesn't feel like it's disconnected stories.
Yeah.
And being able to do that has brought on a whole life unto itself. It's funny. I just had a procedure where I had to go on an MRI for about a half hour or so, and they play music for you. And I heard that they were using Spotify. So I said, could you put my podcast on? They were like, oh, sure, sure. So I was actually listening to me while I was in this MRI for a half hour. I was listening to the latest episode of Runful while I was in this MRI. There you go.
That's that's so good.
It's a
Where
surreal experience if
yeah.
you ever do a podcast or if you do one of these interviews and you want to listen to your own voice. It's a surreal experience.
It is. I know, like I listen to my voice a lot when I'm editing these videos and
Yeah.
interviews. But yeah, the moments where I listen to a finished product, I'm like, huh, it is an interesting concept. And even for me then that I'm like, I'm talking to Rodney Barnes right now, like in
Yeah.
this conversation. So
Yes.
where is it for you that you figure out, because you have your hand in so many different types of mediums, like we said, of
Mhm.
podcasting, comic books, TV, Hollywood, like where do you figure out what story fits the right medium for you?
Sometimes it's by my schedule.
Okay.
If I've got a great idea or something I think would be a great idea, and I don't have the time to write a TV show or a movie or something like that, comic books are great. I started writing comics as an exercise, a writing exercise. If I don't have, it takes me a lot sometimes to go from, I'm doing a mini series at HBO about the life of Jack Johnson, heavyweight champion of the world. And when I finish an episode, I'm exhausted emotionally and psychologically, but I know I have to keep practicing. I have to keep writing. So to be able to do a comic in a day or two is the perfect exercise to get to the next episode of Jack Johnson or whatever else is due. So it's like constantly trying to build in some framework of discipline and infrastructure in my own head of how I'm going to continue to write and just do different things and continuously do different things. So, where what goes where, a lot of times I had an idea for a movie yesterday and my agent was like, that would be a great play. And then I had another idea and he was like, that would be a better novel. And just being able, whether it's me, whether it's my team, whether whoever it is, the opportunity to play in a myriad of spaces is, it's always exciting because there's never that thing that builds in where you get so confident and cocky, like I got this. There's always a newness, a sense of, uh-oh, can I do this?
Yeah.
And as scary as that is, it's also really, really interesting as well to just sort of push yourself in different directions.
Well, it almost seems though to it that it inspires you to try your best, to put your best work forward,
Oh,
right? Like that you don't, you know, not many people, you're Eisner nominated comic creator, and we're having a conversation. You're like, well, I'm going to do my best that I can for Batman because I don't know if I'm going to get to spend time in this
yeah,
world again. So you're putting your best effort into what you got, and I think
yeah.
that makes it a better product in
Yeah,
turn.
and it's also a thing of, once you kind of get a recognizable name and people say, oh, I know that name, you never know who's going to pick up a book that maybe hasn't read Philadelphia
Mm.
before, hasn't read the Star Wars stuff or anything else that I've done. That's your introduction to that reader. That's them getting a taste of whatever it is that you do, and what they walk away with, whether they like it or they don't like it, is the impression that they have on you as a writer. So like to leave a good impression.
Yeah. So you mentioned Star Wars. You are right now currently in like two mega fandoms, Batman, World of Batman, and the world of Star Wars. And how do you approach something those fandoms? Because I mean, they're very passionate, whether it's about Star Wars or whether it's about Batman.
Oh yeah.
How do you approach approach it to tell the story you want to tell while still, respecting all the stories that have been out there, but then still giving credence to, the fans and what they want to see too.
And you're also surrounded by, it's funny. Scott Snyder came out with a really incredible Absolute Batman, and
Hmm.
you got Mark Waid with Batman and Robin, and Jeff Loeb's doing his Batman. So you're in this world of incredible Batman works.
Yeah.
So if you do the one that sucks, you actually suck higher because the other thing around you is so good. So there's an extra sense of pressure. You
Yeah.
got Charles Soule and all the other people in the Star Wars world doing great Star Wars stuff. So if you're the guy that's doing the really bad Star Wars stuff, you're going to stand out that much more. So there's an extra edge of pressure that's
Yeah.
there. Um, but I think for me, the great thing was I got an opportunity to build up to it. My first Star Wars project was Lando Double or Nothing about Young, the Donald Glover version of Lando Calrissian. And I got a taste of it. Some people dug that series, some people didn't. And they have this thing called Twitter. I think it's X now. And they can let you know immediately how much they hate you. Like it doesn't take no gap in between. I
Nope.
hate
They'll let
this,
you know right away.
let you know exactly that I hate you. And somebody's going to hate you regardless. You could
Yeah.
do anything. You could write the Bible. And somebody's going to come after you and say, you know what, that Matthew, there's something wrong in the book of Matthew. Um, you know, for me, once you realize, because there's the feeling of the pressure and wanting to live up to the creative expectations of the property, the big properties, then there's the part that's just doing the best that you can possibly do and living with the results. If you give the best that you can possibly give, I can't really determine how a story is going to land in the minds of someone who's reading it. I
Right.
can't control that. All I can control is I know I did my best. I like it. Um, and you only have hope. It's like bowling. Once you let the ball go, you don't know if it's going to go in the gutter or if you're going to knock all the pins down.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it's like playing in these two worlds.
Yeah. Is there, I'm sure there is a difference. So I guess the question would be is how much of a difference is it for you? Like, so you got your Star Wars book, right? You talked about Lando, which was your original story, and then you had the Mando, Ahsoka, where you're kind of dealing with stuff that has been created, and then you got your Inquisitors, where you get to kind of create these worlds. How is it trying to tackle Star Wars and like take it like an more of an adaptation of the shows versus creating your own stories?
um, they're all difficult for different reasons. The adaptations aren't really as the creative part of the adaptations is how do you take an hour's worth of television and crunch it into 30, 20 or 30 pages
Hmm.
and still make it feel like the original thing?
Yeah.
That's the part that's difficult there. With the original stuff, it's more of what more can you say that feels like these characters. I remember I did a Falcon book. It was the first book I'd ever done. And someone said in the interview the other day that the thing they didn't like about it is it wasn't Falcon. That's not what Falcon should be fighting, Shield and is a soldier. That's what he should always do. And I had him fighting vampires with Blade. And I think in the nowhere more is that true than in the Star Wars world of what characters should do.
Yeah.
The thing that Vader should do. There's a thing that Han Solo should do. He would never do that. And the thing is, you have so much mythology and legacy that's attached to these characters that they have to behave in a particular way. And the adventures that they're on are adventures that have to support that. So when you're pitching and you're coming up with stories, you sort of have to play within the realm of that mythology
Yeah.
and where within the chronology, you're in the Clone Wars or where are you, within all of this. So it's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Well, and I, one of the things I appreciated and loved is you kind of still are who you are as a writer, even in the midst of the Star Wars world, as I was prepping for the interview and I was reading Inquisitors and I'm like, okay, we're going to get a little bit of like, maybe a little lighter. No, it's still dark.
Oh
It's
yeah.
still like, it's still cutthroat. I'm like, oh, wow. Like that's intense.
Well, that was the thing that was, oh, you should have seen the first drafts. They had to back me way off because they said to me, one of the editors said to me, "We want you to do the thing that you do in Philadelphia." I'm like, "Really? Okay, cool." And I did it, and they were like, "Well, hold on, we can't do this. We can't. Like, you can't cut people in half. You can't cut off a kid's head. You can't do some of this stuff." And they did an excellent job in, still making it feel as dark because you're talking about the Inquisitors.
Right.
It's not an Ewok book. It's a book where the Inquisitors don't have a whole lot of empathy for anything. So, and then you got Vader at some point coming in who doesn't have a lot of empathy. This is the dark side. These are Siths. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. And in the process of, like you said, there's so much mythos. Like, in your Inquisitor book, you created a new character to the lore of Star Wars.
Tensu.
Was it,
Yeah.
yeah, was with Tensu, was that mindset of like, there isn't a right character already in the Star Wars world for the story I want to tell, so I'm going to create one? Or was it just kind of like, I think this fits the story better?
I knew the character had to die in the end, spoiler alert. And I knew that all of the characters that are existing live. So I can't kill Luke Skywalker. I can't kill, any of the established folk. So I have to create somebody who feels like they would have fit in that world
Hmm.
that ultimately doesn't win at the end. And
Yeah.
he has to lose in a way that feels like a Star Wars type of loss. There's a winner, but it's not necessarily the good guys. And there has to be a little bit of mess there. It has to be complicated. The good guy can't be completely good. And the bad guys have to have some rationale for why they're bad.
Right.
That required a new character and a new Jedi, a few new Jedis that pop up.
Yeah. So, Rodney, I respect your time. We could talk about comics all day long. But
Of
you've
course,
got
sure.
you
Yeah.
got Batman, you got Star Wars. What else? Is there anything else that you're working on right now that you want to mention or highlight?
Yeah, I've got a Kolchak the Night Stalker book I'm doing with Monsters Books and Kolchak versus Dracula that I'm actively working on. I've got another big horror franchise coming from a company. If I say the company, you're going to know what it is. I would be giving it away. But another big vampire thing that's coming. And I just love being able to play in the horror space. I think it's what I do best. And so the darker, the better.
So, well, Rodney, where can people follow along with you, stay up to date with what you're working on creating? So when you have the news that you can share, you can let them know.
At the Rodney Barnes on Instagram seems to be the place where you can find me, where I'm talking about Run Fool and horror movies and comic books and a bunch of other things. The Rodney Barnes on Twitter or X as well. Those are the places where I primarily communicate with folk. So those would be the places to find me.
And gang, if you are interested in any of the stuff we talked about, you know, Batman Full Moon, Star Wars Inquisitors, Star Wars Ahsoka, any of these stuff, or the Philadelphia stuff, make sure you go support it. Get it from your local comic book store. And be on the lookout because chances are you'll run into Rodney at a con because
You
he do
will.
does a lot.
Rodney does way too many cons. Like Rodney is almost cut. New York almost took me out.
Oh,
I felt like an old man being jostled around in a mall, by kids. It's like it's getting to that point now where I'm like, okay, is there a Zoom component that I could do this?
can
Because
I do
I'm,
a Zoom Comic Con?
yeah, can I do a Zoom? I know we're not in COVID right now, but Zoom was safer for me.
Yeah. So, well, Rodney, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about comics with me. Um, And with that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.